Hi, everybody. Happy Wednesday. I am really excited to have all of you joining us today. We have the most incredible colleague and also advocate in the cerebral palsy space, Xian Horn, joining us today for our Instagram Live. And I am just going to connect her in now. And I am just so excited for this conversation because she is just one of the most incredible people that I am fortunate enough to work with, and I can't wait to be able to share, obviously, her joy and everything else with everyone else. And here she is. Hi.
How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Good. Can you hear me?
I can, but you're sideways.
Okay, so are you. Okay.
Oh, how's
Let's
that?
see. I'm just trying to find a place. Okay. But then I'm halfway. Okay. I might have to hold it. Okay. So sideways doesn't work.
Or I don't know, if I go sideways, does that mean we're both? I don't know. Like,
no, I think. Okay, I'm just gonna hold it. It's just not gonna. Okay. I'm just gonna hold it.
Yeah, I think it doesn't work. I think then we're just both sideways. However, I'm so excited for you to join us, and let's have a wonderful chat today. And oh my gosh, you've got a fan club already happening.
Oh
yes.
my gosh! Well, thanks to you guys.
Xian is wonderful, so we're very excited to have.
Yeah. Okay. I want to say I see Laura just joined us. Thank you. And yeah, I'm so excited to do this. We've talked about this for a while.
As always, please, everyone put comments or questions in the comment section, and we're going to get to them as we go through. I've got some definite things that I want to talk to you about and hear your thoughts on different things that have been happening. But for those of you that don't know, Xian is a teacher, a speaker, a beauty advocate, a woman with cerebral palsy, but the most, as I said, wonderful colleague. And yes, she is an inspirational, amazing person, 100%. So can you just give people a little bit of a background on how your background, like where it's coming from? Obviously, you are a contributor, you are a writer for Forbes, you're an incredible speaker, but yeah, can you give a little bit of background for those that don't know you?
A phone call as this is coming in. This is very professional. Okay. So I was born with cerebral palsy and diagnosed at a year old, had no plans to advocate, thought the best thing I could do was just live my life as happily as possible and let that be an example, and that would be enough. I lived in a bubble, really, where I was an only child, and, and basically I think they really created a space for me to just be myself and be free and authentic. And being the daughter of artists, I think was really helpful because, they're all about uniqueness and, freedom of expression and things like that. And talking about stereotypes for a second, they weren't the typical Asian or Jewish parents in the sense that, like, my dad spent his academic career swimming instead of going to class. And my mom was an artist who really didn't care for school much otherwise. So they just allowed me to be and be free. And so I had no plans to advocate, but what ended up happening is that as I moved on in life, I went to college, and that was transformative. Everyone there wanted to change the world in some way, and that was quite intimidating, I've got to tell you, because, there were 18-year-olds there with 2 nonprofits already, and I thought, oh my gosh. And I think because I was told when I was younger, oh, you should advocate, or you should be a poster child for this or that, I didn't want to do it because someone else wanted me to do it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And so there was a bit of rebellion, I think, against that idea for a while. But then when I graduated college and I was actually doing my second job where I worked for a theater called Visible Theater, I was so inspired by the company I was keeping. There were 45 members total, 15 with disabilities, and these were actor studio actors, Kennedy Center award-winning playwrights. And then when we would talk about, and I would actually sit in on these writing sessions that they would do. And, it was very diary-like. And the things that people were writing, both with and without disabilities, like, these are my role models. And they were really hard on themselves. And I thought, wow, if this is how my role models are doing, how's everyone else doing? And specifically around disability, it really, I know this sounds crazy looking back, it shocked me that people with disabilities would have difficulty with identity or body image, just because I had plenty of insecurities as a girl becoming a woman. But I would say, I don't know how this happened exactly, but the one area of my life that was sort of ironclad that you couldn't touch, that belonged to me, was having cerebral palsy, you know?
Yeah.
And so I realized what a gift that is, and obviously that isn't the norm. But I really, it was a wake-up call in this moment. And so I wanted to have positive dialogue around, first I wanted to support my friends and let them know how beautiful they are and how I saw them, but also having positive dialogue specifically around disability, and just realizing that we all have something to contribute, you know, even for myself, realizing, Rachel, that the beauty in you does not take away from the beauty in me, and vice versa, right? We all have something. You know, you may not, like, you know, you can look at the person next to you and say, well, I don't have that car, or I don't have that life. But that's, you know, doesn't mean you can't have what's perfect for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
definitely. And like, you know, for people who are listening, you know, you actually transformed my thinking. And I'll just tell a little bit, sorry. The first time I met Xian as part of our Design for Disability program that we were doing. And I was presenting to a group of young designers, and I was presenting sort of more statistic type things. And you came up to me and you said afterwards, you're like, Rachel, those statistics are fine, they're great, but that's not how I feel. And it just made me think, I'm like, okay, you know, my background was in research, my background is in numbers, and I'm like, well, I missed the point. It is all about how you feel. You know, there's such this time where you can do numbers and you can say all these different things, but at the end of the day, if you're not responding to people's feelings and thoughts and going that step deeper, you know, what are you achieving? And like, it definitely resonated with me. And I remember that conversation so clearly. It was at FIT. And, you know, it really has transformed the way that I think.
oh my gosh, that means so much to me. But also, I think that if there's anything I learned, especially if we're going to shatter stereotypes, I really try to treat everybody as the individual in front of me, you know, try to put all my preconceived notions about who I am, who they are, off the table, so that I can really receive the person in front of me. And I found, you know, when I do have these preconceived notions, often I'll be completely thrown for a loop. And so I think that that's a really interesting thing. I think the numbers are really important, don't get me wrong, but I do think that sometimes we can look, you know, a statistic can dehumanize.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that's sort of something when we're telling stories, when we're telling narratives, and this is something that you do so wonderfully. And so for anybody that hasn't read any of Xian's blog, go onto Forbes and have a look at some of the things that she writes about, because the way that you write it, yes, the numbers matter and they come in, but you create the narrative around it as to why the numbers matter. Because at the end of the day, I can say, you know, 1 in 1,200 people have cerebral palsy, or 3 per 1,000 have cerebral palsy, but what does that mean? You know, and this is where I think you write so beautifully to explain this to people.
Thank you so much. I mean, I also think I have never come at something coming at it as an Asian woman or a person with a disability only. I think it's really important. I think the key and what's expanded my life is I'm really a humanist first. So I really have only lived my life and write according to what I think the most people will benefit from. So you know, I really just ask myself, will this help humanity? If the answer is yes and I'm available, I try to do it. That's it, you know? And
so I think that segues really nice into some of the things that you really talk a lot about, which is sort of beauty, which is sort of finding your beauty. And, you know, inner beauty, is that really the right word? Because I think it's really the whole being that's beautiful. Mm-hmm. And, you know, can you just sort of explain a little bit about your philosophy around that sort of stuff?
Oh, well, I realize that the kind of beauty that I'm talking about, of course, I think when you've done the inner work, it's important to express it outwardly. Mm-hmm. And it's fun to do that, you know. Thank you for giving me an excuse to wear a jumpsuit today. And actually, my mom put some makeup on me. This is
No,
the most
in
fun
this
I've
time,
been like all month.
yeah, no, I think in this time it like makes us feel good, right? Like it does. It makes you sort of feel like, okay, I'm going to look wonderful today, and you know, you always look
It feels
wonderful.
like
But
self-care right now. It
yeah,
feels like,
totally.
but I think I realize that the thing I'm really advocating for is sort of the spirit of beauty. You know, how do we feel? How do we make others feel? How can we share? How can we know ourselves better so that we have more to give? You know what I mean? Because if we are in the business of healing ourselves, it's really hard to give. You know, and I'm not talking about healing cerebral palsy. I want to make that very
Yeah.
clear. I mean, just, you know, it's interesting. I had a friend say to me, you know, everybody's come into quarantine, and obviously some are out of quarantine now, but come into quarantine with their own baggage. And so I think every human, we have things to work through. And that was sort of the basis for the self-esteem classes that I ended up teaching at NYU and other places, was really the first thing we do is kind of address what's hurt us.
Yeah.
Whether that's culturally or within our, you know, maybe something our parents said to us that they didn't even know was hurtful. You know, what has hurt us and what is holding us back from fully and totally embracing the fullness of who we are and what we have to give and to contribute in the world. That doesn't necessarily mean a job, but it could.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you love to sing, what's holding you back from singing more? If you love to write, why aren't you writing more? That was a big one for me. That's part of why it's amazing, too, that, like, I blog at all because, you know, the younger me, I made words so much. I loved words so much that I almost held them so precious that I never wrote. I was a perfectionist to a fault. And it was really, you know, it was a constraint.
Yeah.
And I think there was something to just saying, whatever I put out there will be good enough. You
And
know,
what was that tipping point for you? Like, when did you get to that stage where it's like, okay, because you know, we have a lot of sort of young followers who are in college where it's like, okay, this is great advice, but how do I make it happen? How do I action this? Or, you know, did you have a wonderful mentor that helped you through the process, or did you do a program, or what were your steps?
well, I think it started with the visible theater people that I mentioned, you know, because about 6 months into grant writing for them, they came to me and said, hey, by the way, would you like to write a monologue and be in our next show? And I said, I've never done this before. And they said, well, not everyone will make it to the end, and it's a year-long writing process, and you write once a month. And I figured I've never performed, but at least if I do this, know that I'll be writing something once a month, right?
Yeah.
So having people that I respected hold me accountable, you know, and having something to kind of look forward to, or kind of an imposed deadline, was really helpful, because it's really easy to put it off, especially when it's your life. You know, and for me, I think I've always known that I had something to share. And I think what also helped me was performing in that show. I couldn't even hear my own voice the first time I performed. And it was for NYU's Initiative for Women with Disabilities. And by the way, there are a couple girls I already saw signed on. So, hey, ladies. Yeah. But when I performed in that show, I couldn't even hear my own voice. And 5 women afterwards came up to me and said, I really related to your story. Thank you so much for sharing. And that's the first time I realized that my story wasn't for me. That there were, you know, whenever we hear a story, we're always putting ourselves into it and maybe holding up a mirror. So I think that's what propelled me, even if I didn't feel ready, to just be like, okay, I have to get ready. I have to do it even if I'm not ready, because there are people who may benefit from what I have to say. And
that's so phenomenal, to put yourself in such a vulnerable position. And I think this is, you know, something that we all hopefully are doing a little bit of right now, right? We're having to do this self-reflection on ourselves because of the world and the environment and everything that's happening, and becoming more vulnerable and knowing that being vulnerable is okay. And, you know, create that support network around you to succeed through your vulnerabilities.
Definitely. And actually, we connect more on vulnerability than strength.
Yeah.
So if somebody comes to you and says, everything in my life is perfect, isn't that wonderful? You'd be like, oh, hi.
Yeah, like,
who the heck are you? But if somebody says, like someone just told me right now, they lost their grandfather last week. Well, I lost all of my grandparents by the time about 10 years ago. And so I was able to say, wow, I can, you know what I mean? I've been there, and we may not have the exact same experiences, but I think that, we really do connect on the things that are not easy more than anything else. And I think that's why, especially at the beginning of quarantine, I think in some ways we were all going through a lot and having things to overcome, but there was a sense that everybody was doing pretty much the same thing. We were all in the same boat for, especially these first 2 months of quarantine, and
exactly.
So anyway,
And like,
a lot to say on
do you have any things that you do each day? Because honestly, you bring so much joy to so many people's lives, and you exude this level of positivity. No, you do, and it's wonderful. It's contagious. So really, when you come into a room, it is contagious for everybody else there to be like, okay, wow, let's do this. Like, you are so motivating to be like, all right, any project that I've worked with you on happens and we get it done, and I don't know how, but we get it done with smiles on our faces and it feels fun. Like, can you give people some things like, do you do anything each day to help with those different things?
Well, I think, people ask, where does, they say, oh, I remember being in college and going through a breakup and saying to somebody that I realized, it took me like 6 months to realize I was depressed.
Yeah.
But I told a friend, and they were like, but Xian, you're always smiling. You're the happiest person I know. And that was a moment where, and I think this is why the self-esteem work is so important, that was a moment where I realized that the outside and the inside didn't match.
Yeah.
But I am happy to report that, yes, there are things you can do. And as I've grown into this work, and also wanting to talk the walk, so to speak, or the roll or the ski, in my case, with ski pole, I think I realized that really the source of all joy is gratitude. You have to start with being grateful for what you have, and and then you can build upon that. I'm grateful to have time to speak to you, Rachel, or I'm grateful to have a safe place to be right now, whatever it is. And it doesn't have to be for big things. And I think also I just love what I do. I genuinely do. So it makes it easy. I don't have to go into it like, okay, I gotta psych myself to, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
no, absolutely.
I think that's why I would encourage people to go in the direction of the things they love.
I was just about to say exactly the same thing. Like, hearing your story and saying, oh, I wasn't sure that I wanted to do advocacy work. I wasn't sure if this is where I wanted to go. But finding that you loved that and finding that brought so much into your life, I think, it's why I do my job. I love my job. I absolutely love working with the people that I work with and, executing the programs that we do at the foundation. And if I didn't do that, if I didn't like it, I just don't know that I would want to be here.
Right. And also, I think it's also following the need. When I realized there was a need for advocacy or this type, or a need for my story or other stories, that's what motivated me to get other girls talking and sharing, whether it was in my NYU classes or if I do a Q&A somewhere. Are we going to do Q&A with this group, by the way?
Yes, I hope so.
Okay.
We're about to. I've got a couple. I want one more question to ask you, though, because it's around advocacy work and it's around some of the issues that you really feel still need a lot of work, right? Because I think all of us as community, allies, individuals with cerebral palsy, other disabilities, we have to come together because this goes back to my numbers, there are some things that need to happen within the disability community when it comes to funding, when it comes to change, when it comes to all these different things. What are some of your key things that you've sort of been working on and pushing on over the last 6 months?
Well, right before all of this coronavirus, this big thing that arrived in 2020, transportation was the biggest thing for me, because I believe that that's a big factor in why employment numbers are so low, is access to equitable same-day travel, which is guaranteed for every other New Yorker, for example, where I am in New York. But I just really felt that this is really a civil rights issue. It's more than just can you get from A to B, but if everyone else has the ability to travel same day, I absolutely believe that it is a matter of human rights for us to do the same. So,
and we've just got a question, and like I couldn't agree with you more. The transportation issue in New York, you know, we've spoken about it a lot. Like it's almost frustrating that we have to talk about it and we're having these conversations about it, because you would hope that this wouldn't be an issue in 2020. But, you know, we've just got a question from someone. I want to start advocating and share my story. How can I start? And I know even just thinking about your transportation stuff with advocacy, you know, there were so many elements that you had to work on there. You wrote a story. There was a petition to sign. I know that you're going to local level government. I know you were doing all these things behind the scenes as well. You know, if someone wants to start, yeah, where can they start?
Well, first, I think it doesn't even, I mean, first, I think it's important, even if you grab your little brother or sister and start talking to them, like it doesn't have to be, you know, I think people think, oh, if I tell my story, it's got to be on a TED stage, or it's got to be like on NBC News, or, you know, I think it's really important to start small. Even with writing, like one thing I've started doing is just like writing 100 words a day, you know? So maybe that means, or just having a conversation with somebody who's looking for advice from you. Like, it doesn't have to be this big thing. I mean, I kind of feel like advocacy found me, but it followed when I started telling my story, you know, you know, when we performed, it was a theater. I mean, maybe 40 people per performance were present in the room.
And I will say to everyone here as well, one thing, and this is because you have done this in my presence so many times and make me now do it in a great way, is that no matter where we are or who you're talking to, you are always open to starting that conversation and being able to tell your story to the people that need to hear it. No, because you're right. Like, it's one of those things to be like, okay, people don't want to hear my story. It's not interesting to them, or, you know, they're so busy, they've got other things going on. But in a matter of fact, most people do want to engage in these conversations. And so it's about telling that story to who will listen.
We learn so much from each other. I learned from, I mean, and I didn't even know the story you just told me about, you know, I definitely, I mean, I took you aside because, you know, that's how but then I remember feeling like, oh, should I have said that? Like, maybe that's, you know, I just met this person, you know. And so for your, you know, your openness to that, I really appreciate it. But I think, going back to what you were saying, I think when we live with ourselves 24 hours a day, and especially when we've been isolated for this long, it's so easy to just be like, oh, I'm boring. Nobody wants to hear that. You know what I mean? Because when we live with ourselves, we know the best of ourselves, the worst of ourselves. We know what we're thinking all the time. You know what I mean? We know ourselves when we have bad breath, you know, our hair's a mess, whatever it is. And so it's really easy to judge that and underplay the role and the value that our voice has, you know? Yeah. And so I think it's really important to first realize that you don't have to have a harrowing, dramatic story for it to be powerful. You don't have to. And I also think that there's almost like this thing of like, oh, well, you know, and I used to have this when I was younger. I remember being on a panel with a girl who, she actually survived a coma 3 times, you know, and I was like, well, what am I doing telling my story next to this woman who's like literally seen death and come back, you know? Yeah. I remember being intimidated in that moment. And I think what I've learned is it's not, first of all, it's not a competition. That's really important. My mom always said to me, you know, there's always going to be somebody taller than you, prettier than you, smarter than you, and it's okay, just be you. And it was a real gift to me. But I think when I was younger, I would see all this beauty and all this purpose in other people's lives. And then instead of it inspiring me to do more, it would just make me say, okay, I'm just going to be in this corner and let them be great. And what I've learned is that we all have greatness within us. We just have to fan the flames so that it can burn brighter, you know?
And for anyone wanting to reach out to sort of do these things, please reach out to our page, reach out to your page, like talk to us, you know, go into our DMs. We are more than happy
and
always
the other thing too is like even asking that question to the person who put that question out there, that's the first step, right? And, you know, if you don't feel comfortable telling your story right away, well, then talk to a mentor. DM me, DM, you know, Rachel, talk to somebody, you know, because that's the beginning. You're already starting your journey just by asking that question. And if you're asking that question, it means there's a desire there that needs to be explored. So I think you're already on that path. So thank you for the question. And are there any others?
There are, hang on, let me. Okay, so this is a really good question as well. The first one is, I want my 3-year-old daughter with CP to be proud and confident. What can I do to promote this? And I love this because, you know, as I'm a mum of a young daughter and 2 young sons, and it is like there's this responsibility as parents to be like, you know, we want them to be wonderful and instill in them everything. Like what is, and your parents have been really wonderful, and I've met your mum. I've never met your dad, but I've met your mum. She is just, I love her to bits. But, you know, what is some of those things that really resonated with you growing up, that maybe advice that you could give to some young families?
Because that was actually the first motivation when I wanted to do this work. I started to ask myself, because when I was in this room full of these incredible studio actors, Kennedy Center award-winning playwrights, writing in their journals, you know, all of this, you know, sort of self-loathing and questioning disability identity, you know, and when I really went inward and said, why is it that I never had some of these issues or these, you know, questions? And the reason really was because my parents created an environment of so much love and support that I really felt I could do no wrong. And my grandmother was almost delusional. She'd say things like, oh, you're the most beautiful girl in the whole world. You know what I mean? So when you have that kind of unconditional scenario, it really creates almost like it's like you're dancing in a padded room. You know what I mean?
But I think your parents still would have like let you fail in a safe environment.
Oh,
right?
Sure. And in fact, perfect example, because my dad was talking about it the other day, is the fact that when I transitioned from walker to pole, right, my dad knew he wanted to go on a ski trip with my mom and me, and he just had this idea. He took the walker that we were about to retire to this ski shop and asked the guy, can you put skis on this thing? And they just took turns, you know, pushing me up and down the slopes. And I fell all over the place, but, you know, within a controlled environment. Obviously, I didn't get hurt. I was, you know, but I said, well, how did I react? I remember screaming from joy. I just enjoyed myself. And it didn't even matter if I was good at it. I was just doing it, you know. So I think creating an environment where you trust your child to try new things, creating an environment where, I mean, because I believe that you as a parent, the parent has so much more power than they realize. And the thing is, as parents, we can, I say that as if I'm a parent, but I think parents don't realize that your fears, your anxieties, your hopes, your dreams for your child transfer. You know, kids know, they can tell. I knew that my parents believed in me. And that's all I needed at the beginning to start my life in a positive direction. You know, so I think to realize, don't worry. I would say, we're talking about stereotypes here. Don't worry about what you think the world thinks of your child. Don't worry about what others are saying your child is capable of. You know your child, and if you can kind of continue to what's the word, fertilize or water your child like a plant with love, and I don't know.
No, yeah, it's no, you're hitting, I think, yeah, I think you're hitting such an important point there, is the fact that it's creating an environment that is safe, that allows success, that allows for people to learn from mistakes and, you know, failure. I don't really like the word failure, but, you know, learning from those different things.
You haven't failed.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, being able to put your child in an environment where they can succeed, where they have the opportunity to do the things that they love to do. You know, going back to your main point, find things that your child enjoys to do. Like go, you know, there, as you said, we've got all these preconceived ideas of what we might want our child to do, but what do they love to do? Because no matter what, absolutely.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think, you know, I will say that one of the saddest things, having done my, you know, program, is getting to the end. And I had this happen a few times where I would have students say to me, okay, after this, I feel like I'm ready to take over the world, but Sean, my mom won't let me go to the movies with my friends.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? So I think, you know, that's very heartbreaking for me because, you know, I think obviously parents want to protect their children, but I think there's a balance to be drawn. And obviously that's your decision to make as a parent. But realizing that your kid has more power than, you know, they may even know. And I think
more abilities, most likely, than you know, you're putting on them. And that's why I'd also recommend to this mum, get an amazing team around you. You know, you could find, say, for example, your daughter's 3. I'm sure you're probably in early intervention therapy and even teachers. Find people that believe in her and that really want to accelerate her through life, not somebody who necessarily thinks that she needs to be fixed or, you know, gets putting in therapy sessions after therapy sessions that aren't towards any certain goal that she loves. Like, find something, find the joy, because I think that's what you come from as like, and it's that, resonate, find the joy, and then skills will develop.
Yeah, no, it's true. And also they will change over time, but that can only evolve with some exploration and some freedom to do that. But I think that love, as corny as it sounds, does make all things possible, you know, because I was so loved. I really didn't feel limited in any way whatsoever. And you know what? Not only did I have cerebral palsy, but I had myasthenia gravis. I couldn't open my eyes for a time, for at least a year or two of my life. And, you know, I think the great thing about being a happy kid is that I almost didn't notice. And so at some point my eyes did open up again. And, you know, I had a cyst on my armpit, you know, and also having great parents in that way. We had one doctor that wanted to cut across my left breast to get to this the cyst, and my parents being smart and saying, well, the cyst is here, why are you cutting across? You know what I mean? So they were able to advocate and get a second opinion and a third opinion. And I also think, so realizing that you are your child's best and first defense, but also realizing that they will fall just like any other child will, and they'll get back up.
And I think you bring up a really good point, because this came up in a lot of the women's health program and the work that we did there, is that when you're looking at how other people perceive somebody else's body and their perception on that, thinking that, oh, okay, well, what does it matter if you have another scar across your chest? What does it matter? Because, you know, you may already have a mobility issue if we do something else. Well, it does matter. And, you know, we have pride in our bodies, and we have pride in like everything that we see. And so I think that point there, to bring that up and to make sure that you do advocate for your children and for yourselves, you know, even a lot of young adults listening as well, it's so important, because some people will be like, oh, you know, you've got all these other issues, so this isn't a big deal. But if it's a big deal to you, then, you know, make it heard.
Yeah, and I think also, if we're going back to stereotypes for a second, I think it's also important not to be the creator of our own stereotype. And let me tell you what I mean by that. Actually, that first time that I performed True Story Project for NYU, one of the girls came up to me afterwards and she said, you know, Xian, I hope you don't mind if we're friends because as you know, and this is not something that I personally believe, but this is what she said. She said, as you know, having a disability means it's hard to make friends. And I looked at this beautiful woman in front of me and I said, look, I know where you're coming from, but I got to tell you that in my experience, if you show that you're okay, you're comfortable in your own skin, other people will feel the same way too. And I don't think it has to be that difficult, you know? And I saw her eyes sort of light up in this way, realizing that this idea she had didn't have to be true and wasn't true. And so I think, you know, oftentimes we're thinking about what society's saying about us, and if we buy into it, or if we decide before we've even begun that this is the case, then we're actually cutting off possibility and the ability to break a stereotype and be different and be ourselves, be our authentic self. So I think this is also true of parents.
That.
No, because I think parents can also have this idea, well, maybe my child won't be able to go to prom if, you know, we don't fix this, or, and I think, you know, putting aside the things you think are possible is really important to ushering more possibility into your child's life too. So,
and just so everyone knows, this is going to be on our Instagram story, so you can go back, because I'm going to go back and listen to what you just said over and over again, because I think these are things that, you know, no, it's like, how do we, you know, have changed behavior? How do we actually have these things happen? Well, a lot of it is this self-reflection and this opportunity to educate ourselves on a different reality sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And I think also we have the ability to create our own standards, to create our own beauty standards. I mean, that's one of the things I wrote about during quarantine, is how everybody's kind of, you know, I feel like I'm questioning a lot of beauty standards now that we have, you know, mostly have had time at home, and what do they really mean, and how important are they really, and how much is it, you know, when we're here at home, are we doing it for ourselves? You know, I hope so. But I think we often are looking at what other people are doing or saying or thinking about us, and we forget that we can be the creator of our own narratives and our own path. So
we have one more question, and I definitely want to touch on it because I don't want to ignore it. So with the crisis like COVID and the racial injustice happening, how can we better elevate disabled voices, especially Black and people of color? You know, like there's a lot of advocacy work, obviously, for us to do in relation to the disability community. But there is this intersection between what is happening now with racial injustice and what is happening within the disability community. And sometimes, you know, you can't separate the two, but you can't, you know, depending on the situation. What are your thoughts on that, and how we can advocate right now, and how we can elevate people's voices, and, you know, what we can do amongst ourselves?
Well, I think if you see someone that you feel you want to give that moment to, let's say you see something that a tweet that you like, retweet it. You know, and I also think that doing something like this, inviting people on your Instagram and having a conversation with them. We may not all be people of color, we may not all be women or men, but we can support each other, we can be allies in this. And I think also it's knowing when it's our time to give the mic to somebody else, you know. And I think, and so it took me about a week to process everything that was going on with the protests and things. And I also didn't want to just jump in for the sake of jumping in. I wanted to make sure that I was saying something that could support my friends and family going through this in a very, you know, from their own lived experience and in their skin, you know. But what I wanted to do was just talk about, you know, because I had a friend ask me, why is this happening right now, right? Why is this happening? And, you know, I said, I really think that, you know, we're all sort of pent up. We're all looking internally. We're all, you know, cooped up. And I think that there are these things that that we're facing now. We can't look away from each other's pain at this moment. And that's a good thing, but it's also incredibly, I mean, it's a growing experience, and all growth requires pain. So I think the most important thing is not to look away and to give space where we can to our friends and family, and especially those of color right now. And I don't know, that's been sort of my...
And I think educate, you know, ourselves, educate, you know, and looking at who we are.
Films,
You know, I'm a woman with white privilege, and I know that, and I've got a lot of self-reflection to do, and, you know, not expecting that our friends and family who are going through so much already right now have to educate me on things that I don't know. You know, there's so much resources out there that we can all go learn about, and particularly, you know, around disability as well. You know, as you said, this might be the time where we've passed the mic, and, you know, but it's not taking away from, we have incredible people who are part of the foundations, our friends, who are doing fabulous work. And I encourage you all, go follow them. Go learn about, you know, what's happening. Go learn about what they're doing. You know, have them part of your inner circle. Like, this is the whole thing. Have them part of your inner circle for friendships, for family, in the workplace, you know, and I think we can all, you know, bring that into the conversation and be part of that.
And also, I think having one-on-one deep conversations with your friends and family that you love, because I also think that there's this temptation to go social media blitz about these things. And in a way, I find that more performative than genuine at times, you know. And I think it's important that you're just, you know, looking inward, looking outward to learn. And I mean, we're in to grow that, you know, no movement grows in a vacuum, right? So, I mean, when you look at the LGBTQ plus community and you look at the disability rights movement, none of it can happen without allyship. So it requires all of us. So that's why, if you ask me that question, I can't answer that alone. And certainly, you know, and not having the lived experience of what it is to be Black, I certainly, you know, wouldn't want to answer that. But I think this is a collective question that we all need to work together to figure out, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there are all those different roles then when we're talking about advocacy, where it starts, you know, as you said, starting off talking to families and friends, starting then talking to colleagues, starting then, you know, broadening your, if you get an opportunity to address a room, if you, you know, tell your story in that environment, you know, if you then want to get involved in, you know, petitions and then thinking about legislation and all those different things, there's so many steps to make true change. You know, we've got a fabulous post up from Sarah Krim about voting. You know, whatever your opinions are, go out and vote.
And I know that a lot of my friends are, you know, because of pre-existing conditions, really can't be protesting right now and all of those things. And so I think there's other ways to do it, to get involved. And, you know, and I think what you were saying, you know, sharing resources, you know, watching films like Just Mercy or The Innocent Files, I believe, on Netflix, you know, and sharing your, you know, thoughts with people, but also allowing space for people to open up to you and share their experiences with you is really important. So
absolutely.
So yeah. So anyway, great question.
I know that was a good one, but thank you.
Deep
you know, we definitely don't want to skim over what is reality and what is happening right now. And, you know, and I think it's something that there is a lot of inner growth that a lot of people are doing, and change. You know, there's, as you said, no movement happens in a vacuum, and the amount of history and advocacy that has happened with disability rights, with LGBTQ, and with racial injustice, these things all need to come together. And I think it's a wonderful question to ask, because, you know, let's all keep talking about it. And I think that's the piece.
If anyone's seen Crip Camp on Netflix, I got to give Judy Human, my friend, a plug there. If anyone can see Crip Camp, it gives you a sense of basically our history as a disability rights movement, where, you know, I don't think I was aware with, you know, the fact that people starved themselves to make 504 happen, and there would be no ADA without 504 and things like that. So
please, that's what's going to be my next question. Where are some resources that you go to? Obviously, you know, Crip Camp, I couldn't agree with you more. If you haven't watched it, go watch it.
But I was going to say something about intersectionality there, because what I learned watching the film was it was the Black Panthers that fed Judy Heumann and her advocate friend, her activist friend. And also they mentioned a lesbian group. And what I'm saying is that I think, you know, all these groups that feel, you know, in some way the underdog or marginalized, I think we have to band together and support each other, because we're much better together. And I was very moved by that, because sometimes I think these movements can get very insular. And I think what's exciting about right now is that this is something everybody is being forced to talk about. And so I think this is when real change happens. Whether people feel comfortable or not.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I think it's important we get out of our comfort zone and have these conversations.
Who are some of your other like incredible mentors that you look up to, that people could, if they want to think about, you know, who's someone that I can go look at the work that they do, you know, research what they've done? Who are some people that are on your like top 5? Do you have a top 5? Who are they?
This is a really tough question. I mean, I think Marlee Matlin is somebody that I now personally know, and I think that's like really like for me as a little girl to think that I would ever know her, because for a long time she was the only person with a disability that I would see in any kind of TV show, or even she was on The Apprentice, you know, but she's just such a generous person. And I think that's a really, and I'm going to say that some of the people on my list aren't disability advocates. And I think that's important.
It is.
Realize that anyone can be your role model, and you can be a role model to anyone. It does, and I think that it's important to realize that mentorship goes both ways. You know, mentors wouldn't do mentoring if they didn't learn anything from you. So I think for me, there's some people that I've been really inspired with their generosity. So Desiree Gruber, who is the creator of Project Runway, is a friend who's always supportive, and she inspires me because she's more interested in getting other people's stories out there and supporting other people. And so I just love to see selfless examples. And she, and it was actually because of, I was able to show her my sticks that were tricked out for the CP Foundation Design for Disability Challenge. Right after we walked that runway, you know, I was talking to her about the fact that Nike sponsored this, and next thing I knew, she said, oh, we should do something like that. So again, it's having allies as well. You know, mentors and allies. So let's see. So Judy would definitely be one of them. And what I love about Judy is she's not interested in telling her story or the fact that she changed history at all. She's more interested in the person in front of her. She has zero ego. So having her as someone so selfless, it also tells you whatever you accomplish in life, don't take yourself too seriously, because
absolutely,
people who are really doing the work don't need to have the fanfare or awards or anything like that. And so some of my favorite mentors are also people who are just allies. So for example, at NYU, one of the first places that I spoke at NYU, the college, the university side, Anita Purr, she actually introduced me to AT&T, and that's how I got involved in the AT&T Disability Challenge. But she has zero interest in being in the forefront. Her goal is just to push everyone else who's doing great work or people with disabilities to make sure, you know, her concern is, okay, my client wants to have a device that helps her put in a tampon. I'm going to figure that out. You know what I'm saying? So,
absolutely.
And she's been doing this 20 plus years. So I think that I really gravitate toward those that are serving others first. And those are just 3 people who come to mind. I'll come up with more. There's so many more. That's why my brain is like.
I know, like, you know, probably a big one that I know that both you and I, we look up to her regularly is Lorene Arbus. You know,
Arbus, okay, she was, yeah.
You know, not only has she been so supportive of us both personally, but, you know, the work that she has done for women and women with disabilities is just extraordinary. And, you know, you've written a really nice piece on her in Forbes as well. So go read it, people. Like, go educate.
Yes.
Back to that question, how can we bring all this together? Learn about some people that are really making change.
But I also think what she really taught me, Lorene, is that secure women support other women.
Yeah.
You know, and we can boost each other up, and we really should be collectively be each other's cheerleaders. I think that's really important.
Yeah. No, and I love that.
She uses, and the thing is, here's the thing about privilege. Privilege itself, it can be a bridge to a lot of opportunity if you use it. Mm-hmm. So she uses her privilege, you know, the fact that she has these resources, that she knows so many wonderful people, to connect other people. So she doesn't keep that privilege to herself. You know, that's where privilege is a problem, is where we're not aware of it. We don't understand what we don't know. And if we, you know, take what we have and keep it and hoard it. And, you know, anyway, so I think she's a great example of someone who's just incredibly generous with what she has, and who, you know, and wants to make sure great things are happening, whether she's involved or not. So.
I know. And she, you know, for those that don't know, her parents actually founded the Cerebral Palsy Foundation a long time ago, and she is the biggest supporter. But as you said, this thing that she does is like, Rachel, you need to meet this person, and you need to meet this person, and connect and tell your stories and work together and come up with a solution. And, you know, it's really quite amazing what she does. And she, you know, she opens up her home so generously all the time. But I think that's like such a nice way to end, because I think it's, you know, you've given so much of your time to chat already, and you and I could chat all day, but probably everyone else is like, we need things to do.
It's so fun. I could do this all day. And anyone who wants to, maybe there was a question you wanted to ask but were too shy to put on the chat, feel free to DM me, add me, I'll add you back. And I just want you guys to know that I can't wait to see what you do. You know, I think one thing I've learned from my mentors is that that we all have a part to play, and so now it's everyone's turn. You know, this is the time. This is, you know, I think this is the benefit of what we're going through right now, is that everyone has had time to reflect, and now we can take action.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you. I can't wait to actually see you in person, and
I know.
One day to actually be able to
socially distance, healthy hug. Okay, couldn't see my hands.
All right. Yeah. We're doing it.
Okay.
All right. Bye. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you so much for joining us.
All right. Bye, everyone.